so I'm assuming you can hear me.
Yeah, maybe.
Hey, Beach, we need to shut that door back there so the heat doesn't get out of here, what little we have. It's so cold that we have trouble getting the heat off the ceiling in here down where we're sitting. There's plenty of heat in the room, we just can't get it down here. Okay. Thanks everybody for coming. This is afternoon. We're going to talk about why we're at this building and how we got it and what might happen to it down the road. That we don't know much about, so we'll get to that a lot later. Before we get started doing that, there's a gentleman just had 36 years of sobriety 2 days ago. Stand up, Rod. Yeah. Anybody else have a birthday the last few days?
Go, Annie.
Yes,
Stand up,
sir.
girl. Yeah.
All right.
Two.
Very good. Very good. Okay, well, this may take a while, so I'm going to get started. I'm Clair Munyon. I'm an alcoholic. And I'm a member of the board of directors of this place and have been for a little while. I took a vacation in the middle, but I've been on it most of the time for 30 years. I'm going to be involved in a lot of this story because I was involved, and I got involved early. But let's go back a few years. 1983, most of the groups that ended up meeting here were meeting in a little church on 31st and P Street. There's a little lady still in church over there. And that's where I started to go to meetings when I got out of treatment. And we were meeting there for about a year. And we had, I'd been sober about a year. We had to move. So we moved to 32nd and O Street. There's a bunch of office buildings and businesses in there, and there was an empty room, and we moved to that room. When we left 31st and P, it had an Alamo Club in the basement, and all the meetings were on the main floor, and the Alamo Club disbanded and was gone. So we just had meetings. So we had about 60 metal chairs and a coffee pot. That's all we had. And we moved to that place on 32nd and O in about, if I can remember right, we moved there about April of '84. And we were there 3 or 4 months, and we had to move again. And nobody knew why. Well, we knew why, because the rent hadn't been paid. The landlord told us to get out because we hadn't paid rent. So, anyway, we had to move and be out there by Friday, I think, of that next week at midnight. And it came around to about Wednesday of that week, and nobody had done anything. I'm sober about 16, 17 months. And somebody said there's a room over at 27th and O Street that's for rent. So I went over and checked it out. Nobody else did. And I talked to the guy and I told him what we wanted it for. And he said, I'll rent to you, but you have to get somebody that has a job sign the lease. I didn't have a job. I wasn't even employable yet. So I took the lease and I took her over to Del Clements. Del had a filling station on 17th and Van Buren. And I had been to a lot of meetings with Del. And he said, and I told him what it was all about. And he just picked it up and signed it. And I said, aren't you going to read it? He said, no, if it's good enough for you, it's good enough for me. I didn't know anything about what I was doing. So anyway, that's how we got to 27th and O Street. And then later Larry Harvey signed that lease also, so we had some people who at least had some jobs sign the lease. And we met there until about August of, no, that's not right. We moved there in August of '84 is when we moved to 27th and O. And when we moved there, I went back, this thing's whistling at me. I went back to find out why we had to move in the first place. And the lady that had ran central office that was in that little church at 31st and P in the back room had taken all the money from the groups and never paid any rent. And the money was all gone. So, that's why Marcella became the manager of central office, because we asked the other lady to leave, which was what we should have done. Anyway, we moved to 27th and O, and we set up a steering committee. And the steering committee was the treasurer of all the groups, and then the treasurer of all the groups elected a chairman for the steering committee. And then we met once a month, and everybody brought their rent, and we put it in the bank. And every 6 months we revoted and had a new chairman of the steering committee, so we would rotate that. Somewhere along the line, we'd been up there about a year and a half. The only group that had a checking account was Twofers. So we put all the money in the Twofers checking account. And it came time to pay rent one month, and there wasn't any money. So where did the money go? So we talked to the guy that was the treasurer for the Twofers account, and we went to the bank. He didn't know, he didn't tell us anything, so we went to the bank and we got the bank statements for the Twofers account. And there were checks there written to Ex-Sarvin, which was the horse race track in Omaha. So anyway, that's where all our money went. So everything wasn't all beds and roses like it is now. We had a few problems back then. Anyway, one of our guys went and talked to the gentleman, and he ended up paying it all back. So we didn't lose any money. Anyway, we moved from 27th and O to 301 P Street in 1987. And the reason we moved, if you know where we were at 27th and O, and we were smoking in that little room. That little room was about not quite twice the size of this room, and we smoked in there. And they had started a new meeting called 60 Minutes, a Sunday morning speaking meeting at that time. And if you stood in the back of the room, you couldn't see the speaker because the smoke level was about this high. So anyway, we had meetings there at noon, we had meetings at 5:15, 7:30, 10 o'clock, 11:45. And there's a whole bunch of businesses around that corner at 27th and O. Well, when we showed up, we took all the parking spots. So the person that ran the beauty salon and the restaurant and the cleaners and whatever else was there were screaming at the guy that owned the land, get these people out of here, we're gonna go broke. So we had to move. And our rent was $450. So we moved to 301 P Street, which is over the viaduct on O Street, first right-hand turn. There's buildings down there. That was an old lumber yard. And they had a big office building with a whole bunch of offices in it, and a basement. And they rented us the basement. And our rent was $1,200 to start with. Now at this point, we're down the road a ways, and I'm signing the leases, okay? And in order for us to pay that rent, we're having dances and bake sales, We bought our own pop machines, we were filling our own pop machines, saving money, making money all we could. And it was a struggle. So we were still doing the steering committee thing and meeting every month. We went to, the rent started to go up. And by now we had at least 20 meetings. Some of those meetings met 7 days a week, but we had more meetings. Okay, we started a Monday noon meeting, we started the 60 minutes meeting and some other meetings. So the rent was going up and we needed to get out of there because we were meeting in the basement and we were still smoking and the furnaces were in the basement of the whole building. So the smoke would get in the furnaces and then it would circulate all over on the main floor, so all those offices were getting smoke all over. So all those people were bitching about us. So, Craig Locke and I started looking for space for all those meetings to go to. Craig was a realtor in town, those of you that don't know, a real successful one. So every time a building came up between Vine Street and A Street and 9th Street and 48th Street, Craig and I went and looked at it. And we looked and we looked and we looked. And did that for probably 18 months. And I got really tired of doing that. And it was time to sign another lease. And I told myself, I'm not going to sign any more leases. Somebody else has got to take over, because I'm not going to be responsible for $18,000 worth of rent a year in case these people decide they don't want to meet there anymore. So I made a decision that I would not look for any more space. And this was in about February or March of '89. 90, long in there, maybe 1990. So we've been out there 3 years. Anyway, I'm in the business of buying houses and rental property at that point with a partner, and I came to work one morning and my partner said, they just put a for rent sign, or for sale sign in front of the church at 28thandS. You ought to go look at it. And I said, I'm not looking anymore. I'm done. And he just kept bugging me, and he's not in AA. And he just kept bugging me, and I kept saying, I'm not looking anymore, I'm not going over there. Finally, about 10:30 in the morning, I said, okay, just to shut you up, I'll go over and I'll look. So I come over, I was just going to drive around the building. And the realtor, member of the church, was repositioning the sale signs out front, putting out another one. And I knew who he was because we bought a couple of old houses from him. So I stopped and I said, show me the building. Don't ask me why I didn't. So he took me through the whole building. And the foundation looked pretty good. The roof was leaking really bad, and I'll get to that story in a little bit. And I said to him, how much do you want for this building? And he said, $106,000. And I looked at him for a little bit, and I said, I'll give you 82. And he said, we'll take it. Shit. I was just going to go back and say, we can't afford it, I'm not going to do it. But he took the offer. I said, okay, here's what has to happen with the offer. We have to be able to hold AA meetings there, we have to do this, we have to be able to do that, blah, blah, blah. He said, we'll agree to everything. So we wrote up an offer, and that started the process for this building, and that was about April. The first thing that we had to do was go, this is all a God thing. I just happened to be the runner, okay? Because I said I wasn't going to look for any more space, and then this building just showed up, and it was just by God's will. So we gotta get this building on the historic register. It's the only way that we can have meetings in here, because we didn't, there's exceptions in a residential community from A to J, A, B, C, D, blah, blah, blah. And we didn't fit any of them. If we were a church, fine. But just to have a meeting place, that didn't fit. So we had to get on the historic register. Had to get on the historic register, had to go through the planning commission, the historic commission, the planning commission, the city council, and the mayor. Okay? So I go to the guy that's a historian for Lincoln at that time, Ed Zimmer, helped me write up the papers, and I go to the historic commission. The chairman of the historic commission is the loan officer we've been borrowing money from to buy houses. So we get through that. I go to the planning commission. This was a day, I want you to picture this. The planning commission sitting at a desk up there, or a table, and all the way around the room are chairs. And there's all kinds of architects with big rolls of blueprints, okay, all of them sitting around there. And I have one sheet of paper, 8.5 by 11, on what I'm gonna do to the building. The planning commission walks in, and I used to belong to the Solars Club, and I worked my way up through the chairs in the Solars Club in Lincoln. And the guy that's chairman of the planning commission was the guy that worked up the chairs 1 year behind me, so I'd known him for years. Okay? So now I gotta go to the city council and the mayor. The mayor happens to be Mike Johans, who just happened to be my attorney in my first divorce. And I had helped him on his first political campaign, and helped him get elected to county commissioner. So he just rubber stamped everything, and probably told the city council this would be a good idea for the community. So that's how we got through the city process. And at the same time, while we're doing all that, a guy named Bill Benedict, who was he wasn't a CPA, but he was a bookkeeper, did a lot of tax work, knew a lot of stuff about the IRS and everything. We applied for a tax exempt status for the building. So we became a 501c3 corporation. Charitable and, what's the other word?
Non-profit.
Contributable and charitable, I think. Anyway, the corporation papers are back on that wall, and the letter from the IRS is back on that wall. And the corporation papers, I went to Doogie Doyle. Anybody remembers Doogie? He was an attorney for 800 years. I think he was about sober about 45 years when he died. Anyway, I went to Doogie and I said, Doogie, here's our plan. We're gonna buy this church, we're gonna have all these AA meetings in it. We need a corporation. So he drew up all the corporate papers, and they got approved by the state. And then we're ready to get some money. The bank said they would loan us 80% of the purchase price. So 80% of 82, whatever that is, plus closing costs. Okay, so the bank's gonna loan us like 64,000 or whatever it was, 65. So we've got to raise 17, 20,000, okay? So Bill Benedict came up with the idea that we would go out in the community and issue everyone that wanted to put funds into this project a 7% simple interest note. 7% wasn't the going rate, and simple interest means your interest, the interest that you make is not gonna compound, okay? So we went out in the community, several of us, started going around the AA meetings, and tell them what our plan was. And we were gonna have a nonprofit charitable corporation to own the building, and if we need money, this is what we're gonna use it for. And if you give it to us, you may never see it again. Because we don't have any idea whether this project's gonna work or not. Anyway, you would be amazed at how many people wrote a check for $250 or $500. A couple people wrote a check for $1,000. Well, 4 or 5 did. A couple of people wrote a check for $2,000. And we raised $32,000 to buy this building. Okay? So we're ready to buy the building. And we're gonna buy the building September 15th. Okay? So in the meantime, central office gets kicked out of Highland Brothers Lumber Company over here on 33rd Street because the building they were in, the roof was leaking. Marcella had pots and pans sitting around catching raindrops. So they were gonna have to move at the end of August. So I went to the people that owned the church and said, we need to remodel the space in the basement before we buy it. And they said, okay. And I'll tell you a little bit why the church was so willing to do all this, because it's a good story. So anyway, we got permission to bring the central office over here. So we placed the place of the basement where central office is now. We started to tear that apart and remodel it. So we rip off all the paneling and the drywall, and the studs are about this far off the ground. This church had termites back in the 30s, and all those studs were gone. So we had to re-stud the whole place and drywall it and everything. But we had some guys volunteer to do that, and we got it all done, got central office moved in here. And then we were gonna buy the place September 15th. And then we found out that if we bought it before October 15th, we were gonna have to pay taxes for that year. But if we bought it after October 15th, we didn't have to pay any taxes. So I went to the people that owned the church and said, we can't buy it September 15th, we gotta buy it October 16th. And they said, okay. And nobody would do that. But they did. Okay, so we go to the bank and we get the money at the bank, and Bill Benedict's there to write a check for us because we got the money in the bank. At the closing was Bill Benedict and me and the realtor that I had talked to, the gentleman that belonged to the congregation that had loaned them the money to buy the church in the first place that hadn't been paid back, and the IRS. The church had not paid any FICA taxes on the minister's salary and the secretary's salary, and the IRS was foreclosing on the building. That's why they said yes to everything. Crazy. You couldn't plan a deal like this. So, God had something to do with it. So anyway, what we had to do when we moved in here, we had to fix a few things. The roof, if you went up in the attic, there's a lot of lumber crisscross like this holding the roof up. There's some steel beams, but there's a lot of lumber. Around a whole bunch of that lumber, over on this side, was a huge plastic. They had it stapled to the wood to catch the rain. And they had that in 4 or 5 places because the roof was bad. So we had to fix the roof of this place. So what we did right after October 16th was we started to work on the roof. We had some money left over. What do we have left over? We had about $13,000 left over. So we started work on the roof. There were times when we had at least 50 people here working on the roof, volunteers from the community. And we also had a van full of people from work release that would rather be over here working than being in jail. So, the first week that showed up, there were 5 guys and 1 girl. So I'm kind of in charge of making sure everybody's doing what they need to do and being where they're supposed to be and everything. And I'd start counting heads and I'd find 4 guys and 1 guy and that girl gone. So I'd start going through the building and I'd come to the room where they were at doing what they were doing and I'd say, when you get done, get your ass back up on the roof. And that happened 2 or 3 times. I mean, this is crazy. We had 2 dumpsters over here beside the building, and some places on the roof, the asphalt was this thick. And they were throwing it off in the building, filling those dumpsters up. Of course, half of it missed the dumpster, so there were people on the ground throwing it back up in the dumpster. And I don't know, we spent a couple of weeks doing that. We put 80-some sheets of plywood on the roof, and that was just to fix the bad spots. And we got all the plywood on the roof. We put rolled roofing on the whole roof. The roof slopes from up here, it's up the top of the facade, and then there's about 3.5, 4 feet below the facade over here. So at 80 feet, it slopes about 3 feet. So there's never any water up there. So the rolled roofing we put up there. And then I don't know if any of you remember a guy named Don Neat.
Yeah.
Don played football at Carmen or something. He's a pretty good athlete. Don was a Conklin roof salesman. He had a franchise for Conklin rubber roofs. Don and Craig Porter carried all that material up on that roof, up through the stairs by hand, and Don Conklin rubber roofed the whole roof for nothing. All we paid him for was the material. He did all the labor for nothing. So we had some people really work hard in here. And if you look around in this room, over there you can see some streaks where the roof's been patched, and over here you can see some streaks where the roof's been patched or sealed, and over here, a guy named Ron Stewart, if anybody remembers Ron, he died here a few years ago. Ron went and rented scaffolding and all the material, all the plaster and the paint and everything. And he come in here and he put that scaffolding together, and every day he would climb up there and work on that spot. And he worked in here for months. Never charged us a penny. So we had people that really got involved and really helped. When we were doing the roof, BJ and Sally Marsh were doing the cooking. They were cooking sloppy joes and potato salad and whatever, because we had to feed those 50 people that were around here working. Had to have something for them to drink, had to have coffee, so those gals worked really hard taking care of those people. There was another guy named Don Dozier that was around at that time. Don was on the board. He's one of the guys that's on the corporate papers back there. BJ and I, Marshall Whittemore, Don Dozier, and Craig Locke, I think, are on those papers, and a couple other names. Anyway, all this stuff we did was fun. That steering committee that I talked to you about, you better stay in front of the mic. That steering committee that we had set up for all those groups, we still had that steering committee when we moved in here, and then we had a board of directors that replaced, that was for the corporation. So the steering committee would come to the board of directors meeting and bring the rent, and we'd talk about everything. Then eventually the steering committee dissolved, and we just had a board of directors. when we moved in here, the steering committee had $3,500, almost $4,000 of reserve money, because we needed to have some reserves when we were out at 301 P Street. And the steering committee gave all that money to the Meeting Place Inc. for repairs. Now, I want to go back just a minute. When we first started this process, we had all these meeting at 301 P Street. So the steering committee got together, and I told them what we were thinking about doing, buying this building and moving here. Go back to your groups, get a consensus, and then we'll meet again in a week. Okay, this is right after we had an offer. Everybody came back, and all the groups were unanimous that they would agree to stay together and move to here. If it hadn't been that way, we couldn't have afforded to do it. Now, that's hundreds of people at 8A that actually got together and did something as a project in unison for the good of 8A. That kind of thing wouldn't happen very often, but we were really lucky that all that happened. Okay, we had a whole bunch of things to do here that we started doing in October. The roof, I already told you about, okay? The sign that's out front was 70 or 80 years old, and it was falling apart. We had two guys that were carpenters that took that sign home and rebuilt it, just like it was originally, and brought it back, and it's been great ever since. Those same two guys, the only bathrooms in the place were in the basement. So the bathrooms over here and the bathrooms on the third floor, they're all stacked on top of each other. Those two guys put in all the studs, all the walls and the drywall and everything for those bathrooms. And they never charged a dime. John McCabe, anybody remember John?
Yeah.
John was running Cornhusker Granite out on Sun Valley Boulevard at the time. So to get these bathrooms all done, drywall, John donates all that tile that's in them, the floors and the walls, and he sent a guy over to do it all. Never charged us a penny for any of that. So we had a lot of people doing a lot of volunteer work and for a lot of money. It didn't cost us anything. One of the things that we needed to do was redo the electric system in this building. I still have it, it's downstairs, and the old panel fit out here behind this wall where there's a new breaker panel. In that hole where that breaker panel's at, used to be a fuse box, about this tall, about that wide, with a row of fuses down both sides. When we bought the building, there were 30 amp fuses in all those, and 2 or 3 wires hooked up to some of them, and there were a couple of them that had a penny behind them. Anyway, we were blowing 30 amp fuses every time we plugged something in. So we had to upgrade the electrical system. And it was in serious trouble. So I'm down here working one night, and a guy calls me. The guy's name was Marv Dinsmore. Anybody remember Marv? Marv was a manager of some restaurants here in town. And Marv said, "I hear you need help down there." I said, "Yeah, we sure do some." He said, "Well, I've got a guy that's got 6 months sobriety, going through a divorce, and he needs something to do because he's going crazy." I said, "What's he do?" He's an electrician. He was an electrician for, oh man, that name slipped right out of my head. One of the big electric companies here in town. In fact, he was an estimator for them. He'd gotten past journeyman. He was better than that. Anyway, Lee Heitman, who now lives in Omaha, had 2 little boys. And he came down here every night after he got off work from Shannon Electric. My file cabinet opened up. He got off work from Shannon Electric, he would come down here with these two boys, and he would work on electric, and I'd be working on a doorway or something, whatever the fire department wanted done. And his two little boys and my little schnauzer played hide and seek in this building. There weren't any locks on any doors, so everything was wide open. Anyway, Lee spent 6 months down here rewiring this building. And we still haven't had to do anything more than what he did there. And at one time we had 12 window air conditioners in this building. That took a lot of electricity. And then in 2010, we started putting in furnaces and central air, and we got rid of those 12 window air conditioners, and our electric bills went down. Okay? Now, let me tell you about the heat system. This building had an old boiler system. Anyway, the boiler in the basement holds 200 gallons of water. And it had to heat that water up into steam, so the steam could go through the pipes and get up on the 3rd floor. The burner is about this long, and it goes like this. And when it took off, it shot flames all the way around, about like this. It sounded like a 747 taking off. And early on, in those first few years, some of our heat bills were $2,600 a month. So we were just barely scraping by because some of those bills were really high before we got central air and heat in here. Anyway, another guy that volunteered, well, I don't know if he volunteered, I pushed him a little bit. When we bought the building, they couldn't figure out how to heat it. They had never been able to figure out how to heat the building. They couldn't get any heat in the central office. They couldn't get any heat on the 3rd floor. And they had trouble heating this room in here. So, anyway, I had been sponsoring a guy named Lynn Ostrowski, if anybody knows Lynn. And Lynn was an old Navy boiler man. He ran the boilers in a Navy ship for years. And I had gotten Lynn a job out at ADM running their boiler system. So I called Lynn and I said, we can't heat the building, Lynn. One of the congregations had built a ductwork that went from this open area up here across clear over the north side of the building, and they had a squirrel cage fan trying to pull heat out of here over there to heat it. That's how bad it was. So anyway, I told Lynn we had a problem. Lynn came over here, took him down in the boiler room. It's got 3 big gate valves, 2 big ones and a little one. We went through the whole building, and Lynn went down and adjusted all those gate valves, opened some up, closed some, and he said, if you'll spend about $400 getting some insulation from pipes in the basement and put it here and here and here and here, I think that'll solve your problem. And it did. We've been able to heat the building from 1990 to 2010, never had any problems with it at all. Just because of his expertise. And he never charged anything for it. So those kinds of crazy things just went on and on and on and on. Oh, when we were redoing the bathrooms, there was a plumber for Green's Plumbing. He'd come over here and put in the stools and the sinks and everything for nothing. Did all that. I don't remember his name. And then on the 3rd floor, there's a set of stairs up there to go up the 3rd floor. And when we went up there, when we moved in, the railing was about this high. You could just trip and fall over that and fall clear down the stairs. So the city made us close that up. So a guy named Trey Faisal, anybody remember Trey?
Yep.
Trey was as goofy as anybody ever remembered. His dad used to own an Irish upholstery shop over here on B Street. Anyway, after his mind kind of cleared out of the drugs and the alcohol, Trey come over here and he framed in that whole stairway on the 3rd floor. He had a 22-ounce framing hammer, because that's what he did for a living. He hit a 16-penny nail twice and it was in. And I just stood there and watched it, and it was amazing. Anyway, got those stairs all closed in. He never charged anything for that. So, what else am I going to talk about? Oh, in the basement, we had a big old kitchen, and a guy named Morris Motes, anybody remember Morris? Morris Motes kind of ran the kitchen for several years, sold sandwiches and all kinds of stuff out there to all the meetings and everything. That's how we used to do it when we first got here. Okay. Right after we moved in here, not too long after that, the non-smoking thing started. Okay? So it's really ticked people off back then. So we couldn't smoke. There were supposed to be non-smoking areas in the building. So we moved the smokers out of the big room in the basement, because we weren't even meeting up here yet. This was early on. We moved the smokers into 1B in the basement and put in an exhaust fan system. Well, it didn't work too well, because the smoke still got out in the big room. So we had to stop smoking down there. So 60 minutes, the Sunday morning meeting was meeting in the basement. And when we had to stop smoking, they moved up the 3rd floor, because we had a attic fan that vented into one of the rooms on the 3rd floor and pulled the smoke out. So they met up there for a while. So we had all kinds of crazy stuff going on. Okay. We put in the handicap ramp on the west in, I think, 1991, 92, along in there. Where that door is, where you come in now in the handicap ramp, that was a window. And where the bathrooms are, that was the secretary's office. So all that got changed after we bought the building. We've put a new water line in from the street many years ago. So that's all taken care of. We put plexiglass on the windows outside, because when we first moved in, about the time we were doing the roof, if you look up at that window over there, the south one, the left one, the bottom corner on the right, those 2 pieces of glass are different color than the rest of them. Somebody threw a rock through there, and Sally March replaced those. She liked to work with stained glass, and she redid that window. And then we went to the Woods Foundation, or the Malone Foundation, whoever it was, not the Malone, somebody else. Cooper. And we got the money to put 1/4-inch plexiglass on all the stained glass windows on that side and these 3. And since then, we've got another grant, and we've plexiglassed all the stained glass windows, so they're all protected. So we had to do a lot of those kind of things. Let's get back to the 7% simple interest notes that people gave us. In about 1992 or 1993, we're solvent. Our mortgage payment was like $560. So our mortgage payment, utilities and everything were less than $1,000 most of the time, which was way better off than where we were before. Okay, so we started to accumulate a little money. So in 1992, we started writing all those people that had given us money and saying, we're a nonprofit charitable corporation. If you really don't want your money back, You can donate it and take it off in your taxes, or we have some money and we can pay some people back. So there were 3 or 4 people that really needed the money, probably shouldn't have given us any in the first place, and we paid them back, and about 10 people wrote off their donation as a tax write-off. And then about every 2 years after that, we wrote that letter out to people until they were all paid back. By 1999, we had everybody paid back. So that worked out pretty good. Nobody lost their money unless they wanted to. Okay, which brings us up to more current than I thought we'd get to, and that is that in about 2015, 2016, we remodeled the old kitchen and set up the archive in that room next to central office. I gotta tell you this story. In that old original kitchen that Morris ran, when we would have Thanksgiving dinners and Christmas dinners and stuff, it had an 8-burner stove, 2 ovens, no pilot lights, and had a note up above the stove: don't turn the oven on first and then light the match. Light the match first. Well, somebody didn't do that, and they blew flame all the way across the kitchen, because when you turned the button on, the gas came out, but there wasn't any pilot light to start it. So we had to get rid of that old stove because it was really dangerous. I mean, crazy things. Everything hasn't been modern. Okay. I have, just to let you know that, I have Welcome to the Meeting Place, the old letter. I found it. December 15th, Independence Intergroups Christmas Party Dinner and Dance was the first event in this building. December 15th, 1990. And then all through December we had alcathons, open house, so on. Okay? I would be willing to take questions at this point if anybody has one. Okay? Well,
Claire,
yes.
who was the young lady that printed our signs? The lady that,
Yes.
there was a young lady.
Yes.
She
Nikki
had-
Church.
Nikki Church.
It's 12 steps and 12 traditions were done in 1990, early 1991. I put those pieces of plywood, put lumber on the back of them so they wouldn't curl, and laid them up here. And Nikki Church came in here and free-handed wrote those all out with pencil, and then put the black on top of the pencil. Never charged us anything for that. So we had a lot of volunteer stuff.
She spent days doing that.
Yep.
Do you remember who did the drawings of Bonneville?
The pencil drawings of Bonneville, I don't remember who did them, but those are copies. The originals are down in the archive because they're locked up. I don't remember who did those.
There, we had a lot of people working besides just the main guys. You know, over the years we have had volunteers helping out with maintenance work and cleaning. We do hire cleaning now, but you know, we've had so many people that have been in recovery that have donated their time to help keep this building going. And you know, when I was on the board, I remember we had maintenance. Well, when I first came on the board, I was in charge of maintenance, and every time I'd see a board member, they'd turn around and walk away because they knew I'd ask them to do something, you know. And at that time, we were having trouble with toilets flushing or something, you know, and I always got a kick out of that because every time they saw me, they'd walk away the other way. But even being involved on the board, we would have people volunteering to help out to keep this building going. And, you know, I sobered up in '89 and I came to this building from 301 P Street. And it has been a godsend for Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, and it has expanded so much into so much more than we thought it would. You know, with so many different types of meetings and everything. But this used to be the central hub of AA for a long time. So Lincoln does have wonderful AA fellowship.
Yep. We have 66 meetings a week in this building. And when we moved in here, we had 28% of the AA in Lincoln, Nebraska. I have no idea what we have now, but probably more than that.
Possibly.
I forgot to mention this. I had the first check central office gave us in October of '90, which would have been September, Brent, $250 we charged them.
How about the neighborhood? I know we've had some ups and downs, but overall, hasn't the community here, neighbors of this building, been very generous and kind?
The neighbors have been really great, yeah.
Because we couldn't have done it, or this area could not have made it without that cooperation and appreciation.
Yeah, no, we had an open house when we moved in here and had the whole neighborhood invited to come in here and look and see what we were gonna do and everything. Told them about it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we've ever had any real angry neighbors.
They've been kind of disgusted with the smokers,
Smokers.
Well,
because we had to clean up that quite a bit.
other than I ran into a conflict with Anna next door once.
Yeah.
She was griping about things, and I had done a survey on the building, and I said, Anna, your brick fence is 2.5 feet on our lot. If you don't want to move it, that would be fine. Just don't argue with me anymore.
But overall, we have a unified consensus with the neighbors, with Clinton area, that we have been good neighbors to the community, and we can be proud of that.
Yep. Okay, we could talk a little bit about plans that they're talking about. I don't know that they'll ever happen because they have to raise a lot of money to do them. Somebody else was supposed to do this part, but I'll do the best I can. If they can raise $1.5 million, they might be able to put an addition over here where the handicap ramp and the flower bed are. And in that addition would be new bathrooms and an elevator to all the floors. But if we do that, we eliminate the parking lot basically, having about 4 spots. And then we gotta change quite a little bit of other stuff in the building to meet handicap requirements and fire code and all that stuff. So whether it ever happens or not, I don't know. But there's some people trying to get that done. So we'll see what happens. Okay? If that doesn't happen, what we can maybe do is spend a little money on the interior of this building and fix things up a little bit. Okay? That's about all I have.
I recall years ago, you had some company spend a few months doing a lot of exterior water blasting and painting the building and tuck pointing.
We did. We had a company, we got some grants from a couple foundations in town, and we had them go through and remortar the cracks, recaulk the cracks, and paint the building on the outside. Yes, that's been several years.
Several.
Okay? Yeah, Bill?
The central office rent space from the 501c3.
Central office rents.
Any space from the 501c3.
Central office is a 501c3.
Now, do they need space from your 501c3?
And they pay the meeting place rent. And I think the rent's up to $450, I think. $440. Jim back there gets the checks, so he knows how much it is. We charge them a tremendous sum of $440. They not only have the room where Russ sets, but they've got 2 or 3 other rooms for storage rooms, so we don't charge them for it. And they don't have to pay any utilities. Or internet. Okay? Thanks for coming.
Thank
Yes.
you.
I just wanted to say thank you from the very bottom of my heart for everything that you've done to make this, building available for us, and you've changed many lives.
I couldn't hear it.
I'll tell you afterwards.
Okay.
She said thank you.
And I'd like to offer one other thing. We have a tremendous reservoir, if you will, history of AA in this community available, and I'm one that hasn't looked at it all, but I've looked at some of it. And it talks about this information that's on the side up here on the stage, the downstairs below, next to the meeting, or to the central office, we have an area that's been set aside for history of Lincoln AA and also additional about history and all of AA. And the last part is, I'm pretty close to Clair. He used to be my neighbor. He decided to move out of my neighborhood, move out to Capitol Beach, but I'll never forget, I was new, sober, and he came over the fence, and I was like 6 months sober, we just moved in, and he just said, don't have any wild parties in here, you know. But Claire and BJ and others put a lot of effort, and the other people he's mentioned and more. But I just appreciate also from my personal standing of what he did. He put passion into this building. He's not the only one, but that passion is what drives us in this fellowship. It's that love, unselfish love that he gave, and BJ and others. So I just wanted to share that too. Thank you.
Let me throw out a couple things. We have an archive room downstairs by central office, and in that archive room, just a couple of things that might interest you. There's a book signed by Bill Wilson. There's some books that Jack Kirkland had. And he, in his 67-year medallion, a copy of that's down there, a picture of it. And we have all 16 printings of the second edition down there. And we have all 74 printings of the third edition down there. So you might want to take a look at some of that stuff. And we have several books. We have a book signed by Marty Mann, who was the first woman sober in AA. We have a couple of books signed by movie stars down there. And this stuff all came out of the Cyberling Gate Lodge in Akron. And this is the original set, and the only set they ever made when they made the Cyberling Gate Lodge and AA Museum in 2004. And we have it.
How'd you get that, Claire? How'd you acquire that?
It was a God thing.
Yeah.
It's crazy, okay? We went to Branson, Missouri, to a 3-day conference down there, because we used to live down there part-time. And I'm talking to the guy that's got the Western Missouri Archive booth down there, and some of the books he's got. And I looked at him, and I love history. So on the way back to Lincoln, I'm thinking, we gotta have a lot of old books around Lincoln. We ought to have an archive in Lincoln and have some of this stuff in it. So I started an archive in 2016. We started remodeling that space and putting that archive room together. So in 2017, BJ and I and James and Luann go to Founders Day in Akron. and they have it at Akron University. So we're staying in the dorm, and then you go to the student union, and it's several stories high, and it's got 1 million rooms in it, and people are selling medallions and t-shirts and all kinds of crap. And I'm just walking down the hall, and I look down this hallway about 100 feet, and there's a guy sitting down there with some tripods like this, with some placards on them. So I walk down there to see what he's got. And he has done a study on all the women that helped get AA going in Akron. And there's a placard for each one of them. And I said, man, I'd love to have a copy of those for the archive in Lincoln. Told him I'd started the archive here, and I told him all about the meeting place. How many meetings we have, and all the room we have, and everything. And I gave him my business card, 2017. 2020, he texts me, and he said, I remember you telling me about all the space you had in your building. We're going to remodel the Cyberlink Gate Lodge.
Where Bob and Bill had their first meeting.
Where Bob and Bill met for the first meeting, and we're going to get rid of everything in there. Would you like to have it? And I said, we'll take it. He said, you have to pay for storage and shipping. And I said, okay. And they packed it all up and put it in a storage area for a moving van company. And he called me one day and he said, it's on the way. And that's how we got it. Cost us a couple $1,000, but we've got it all. And the meeting place now owns the archive. Okay? Everything that's been put together belongs to the meeting place. But we have an archive committee to make all the decisions about it. We also have in the archive all of the Grapevine magazines from 1953 to current. And some of those old issues, pristine like Paul Southern kept them, are worth $75 a piece. Okay, calculate that up to $15,000, $18,000 in Grapevine magazines. We have them up high so nobody can reach them. There's some cool stuff down there. Anyway, this stuff's interesting. If you've never read it, spend an hour up here. You can also take pictures of all those different things and look at them at home.
And tell them about the recordings on that one table, Claire.
Oh, okay. On this table, if you have a few minutes, there's this table set in the room where Bill and Bob met originally, okay? Set right between the two chairs. There's a black button on here that you can push, and it's Henrietta Cyberlink talking for about 20 minutes, telling how she got Bill and Bob together and how they met that first night. And then you push it again, it's Bill Wilson talking for 12 minutes about how he and Bob spent that first meeting. If you push it again, it's Dr. Bob Smith talking about how they got together and what it meant together in their original voices. It's not a recording of nothing but them. Okay?
Cool.
So sometime if you got an hour and you want to spend in here, talk to me and I'll let you in.
Thanks,
It
Claire.
was a God thing.
It was.
Three years later, he texted me, you want this stuff? Why didn't they have a room in Akron to put it in?
Because you asked.
No, I'll tell you a crazy story why they did that. They remodeled the Cyberlink Gate Lodge and put it back in its original condition, kitchen and everything, old appliances and all that stuff. But the real reason they did that was because several years ago, New York decided that you couldn't use people's last name, even if they were dead. Okay, now if you look up here, it says Dr. Bob Smith and Bill Wilson. Before they were gonna send this stuff to us, they wanted to change it. They wanted to cross those last names out. And I said, this is history. Just for the sake of history, don't mess with it. Leave it alone. And then he said, okay, we will do that, hoping that you change them when you get them.
Surprise.
We're still waiting.
We're not gonna change it.
Thanks, Claire.
Thanks,
Anyway,
Claire.
thanks for being here, listening to me, and hopefully the meeting place will continue forever.
Thanks, Claire.